Teams looking for an underrated but exciting quarterback should look no further than Old Dominion transfer Colton Joseph. Had a massive year for the Monarchs, threw for over 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns. He also rushed for over 1,000 yards and 13 more touchdowns. If you're looking for a dual threat ability quarterback, Colton Joseph is the guy to look at. Super underrated, super talented, and in the right offense, he could have a great impact. We're going to take a look at some of the landing spots that make sense for him and talk about why he'd be a good fit. James Franklin is going to have to do some work with his roster. So Virginia Tech feels like a good landing spot for Joseph. He's going to have 2 years of eligibility. So it gives James Franklin an experienced quarterback who knows what he's doing. Virginia Tech also is pretty familiar with Old Dominion and specifically Colton Joseph. When you look at what they did this year, the Monarchs absolutely destroyed Virginia Tech, and Colton Joseph was a consistent threat for them against that team as well. So if James Franklin is looking for a quarterback that can kind of be that bridge quarterback to whatever quarterback ends up taking over for him, that could be a good fit. I think that James Franklin knows how to get the right people in place to call plays, and we'll see what happens obviously with that. But Colton Joseph is, like I said, the dual threat that can make an offense go. When you look at Virginia Tech's struggles, they had a quarterback that had the potential to do that, but Colton Joseph took steps as a passer, and that's a huge selling point for him in the portal. Now, there are a number of other schools he could potentially go to. He's probably going to have quite a bit of attention, but he wouldn't have to go far if he wants to stick around the same area. Virginia Tech is going to need someone to be able to lead this team, and Colton Joseph could be that guy. Indiana's most likely going to be without Fernando Mendoza after this year. It seems like he's probably going to go to the NFL draft. And while they don't necessarily need a quarterback, they would at least have an idea of what Colton Joseph could do for their team. He ran for 179 yards against that Indiana defense, which is the best rushing performance by anyone that the Hoosiers have faced this year. So if Indiana is looking for a guy to help this offense, especially next year when there might be a lot of turnover, this is someone who they could look for. Depends on the coaching staff. There's probably maybe some turnover coming with how successful they've been. Maybe those guys are going to get head coaching opportunities. But if everybody comes back, they're going to need a quarterback. And maybe it's Fernando Mendoza's younger brother. Maybe it's going to be a transfer. But Joseph is one of those guys that could have a big impact and be a dynamic player for the Hoosiers. Now, here's the thing. I don't necessarily know if a Power 4 team is going to want him. So if he does have to stick within the group of 5, he might go closer to home. San Diego State is a good fit for him. Sean Lewis needs a better quarterback, a more consistent quarterback. Jaden Denegal just has been okay. I think he's just been an average quarterback. So they need someone to elevate that offense. And I think that Colton Joseph and Sean Lewis offense would be phenomenal. You're talking about a guy who has dual threat abilities. He's accurate with the football. He can make home run runs. That's going to be a really fun pairing to me. And again, if he is wanting to return closer to home, I don't necessarily know what his options are. Could look at UCLA, although Nico is there. USC, depending on what happens, but they do have Husan Longstreet coming in next. So I don't necessarily know if those teams are looking for opportunities. So you might have to look at the group of 5, and San Diego State would be a good fit. USF is set to hire Brian Hartline as its next head coach, and he might be looking for a transfer portal quarterback that can give him a little bit of stability. Byron Brown is on his way out, so Colton Joseph could be a great quarterback for Hartline to get. Hartline's done a great job of developing the talent that he's been able to bring into Ohio State, and he could do the same for USF. You're putting him in a great spot in South Florida, and it's going to be fun to see who he hires on his staff and what players he goes after. I really like the idea of him joining Hartline's team, and it would be fun to see what he can do depending on who runs that offense. So right now it's kind of a tentative really because they don't have an OC yet, but I do like the idea of Joseph learning from a guy who has proven that he can develop his players really well. The final big one that I had is Georgia Tech, and it really is hinging on if Brent Key and specifically Buster Faulkner stick around. Haynes King has done a lot of great things for Georgia Tech, but eventually all things come to an end. Colton Joseph could be the exact same thing for them, maybe even a little bit better. Some of the talent around him obviously has to develop, but if there's a guy who knows how to use his quarterback, his dual threat quarterback, it's Buster Faulkner. You could make an argument that Colton Joseph could be a little bit more consistent as a passer. We've seen his ability to make throws downfield. So Faulkner might be excited about the idea of 2 years with this guy running the show. That is another closer to where he is place that he could land. And with the Yellow Jackets looking for someone to take over the offense in the future, Colton Joseph could be the guy. There's plenty of big time opportunities for him to transfer to be able to take advantage of, and it'll be fun to see where he ends up. Has a lot of good abilities as a dual threat quarterback, and it was a fun year for the Monarchs, and I'm excited to see what's next for him in the future.